So I want to say Happy New Year and happy reading to you guys. But given the fact that I DNF'd two of fantasy's biggest and most loved books in the month of December, you guys might not want to hear from me again. You guys might want me to just disappear. But that's not happening. I'm still here. I'm still churning through books. It is holiday time. I have been reading like crazy. I've been telling myself in 2025 I will be reading less so I can focus on more books. But it's holiday time. I am in the zone at the moment. I am flying through books. And I'm like, all right, we might be setting that goal to 100 again. Who knows? That still has to be decided. But what I do know is it is now January 1st, and I have to talk to you guys about my December reads, my January TBR, and we have lots to discuss. This was a very weird month for me. The books I should have loved, I didn't, and the books I shouldn't have loved, I did. Things got weird this month, guys. I didn't read as much as I normally do. I was a little bit distracted, I'll admit. I had some really nice things going on, so I wasn't able to read all the books I'd planned. But I got through plenty, read one off the TBR, so I did pretty good with sticking to the TBR game, which we'll go through at the end of the video. There was one book I wasn't expecting to like that I ended up loving more than anything else. There's another series that surprised me, and then those DNFs that we'll now dive into. But before we dive into the books, please let me know what was your best and worst read from the month of December. What are you planning to read in January? And while you're down there commenting, make sure you like the video, subscribe. We've got a lovely community building here. Let's keep the hype going despite my horrible takes on the Dragonbone chair and Winded Truth. So I started the month off very strong with Until the Last, the third book in Mike Shackle, The Last War trilogy. Now, in my last wrap-up, I talked about in book 2. I got a little bit of action fatigue with this series, and there was one plot device used that seemed like a bit of a cheat code for the series, which it's filming towards me, you're fine. And I was a little bit down on the series, but book 3 did a very good job of keeping me interested. Firstly, Mike is a really good writer. His prose is more on the simple, like more on the plain side, but just like John Gwynne, it's highly effective. It's very gripping. You're always compelled. You always have very good imagery. It's very cinematic. And you don't feel like you want any more flowery lines like you would in some other books. It just feels exactly like what it needs to be, but there's still really good lines of both writing and dialogue that leave you thinking like, oh yes, I want to write that down, I want to quote that. Then the actual book paced out really well, good action throughout, but not too much. There was really good character development. The arcs of our characters in this series was fantastic. Now, they weren't the most motivating character arcs. They weren't character arcs where you're like, oh, I love seeing this character go through this journey. No, our characters in this series start off in a place where you're like, that's kind of questionable. I don't know if I really like this person. And then they do a complete 180 and you're like, yes, I still don't like this person. But they're very compelling journeys. They're very interesting to see how this messed up situation has gone and changed our characters. Now, it wasn't a completely perfect series. I did have some issues with some of the magic just right at the end, just being a little bit too overpowered, which is a complaint I often have in last books of series, when sometimes authors just try to make things too hard for the characters throughout their journey, and then right at the end they're like, oh shit, we have to beat this big bad, and they just give someone a little bit too much power. And there's a couple moments throughout the series where I feel like there's a little bit too much copying Marvel. There was just two instances in particular. None of the others felt like they were stealing too much, but there definitely is an anti-hero Avengers vibe to this dark fantasy epic, if that is something you are interested in looking into. But yeah, Until the Last was an absolute blast, and I will definitely read anything else Mike Shackle writes. He's definitely won me over as an author. His writing style reminds me a lot of John Gwynne, just darker with less likable characters, but still good characters, just not characters you cheer for, you know? Now, moving to the first DNF for the month, that was the Dragonbone chair. Now, that was our book club read, and I don't know why I didn't finish this one. I just wasn't in the mood for it. The Dragonbone chair had everything I loved in fantasy. It was a slow build, which is what I've been loving recently. I don't always need a lot of action. This month I kind of have been craving a little bit more action, but Dragonbone chair, nice slow build, really good just air of just building mystery, building intrigue, building questions that you have about this land, a huge epic classic world, but not like the same classic world of elves and dwarves and stuff. Like Tad Williams has changed it to make this classic fantasy his own thing, and you definitely feel that. And his writing is nice. It's kind of like a little bit of Hobb and Martin. Characters aren't that same level. The character names he uses are awful. They're just like Simon and Kevin, and so bland. Like, come on, give me something rich. like an Amanda Rake. Come on, it's not that hard, especially like fantasy. Like I just wanted some nice juicy names, and Simon just wasn't doing it for me. But this is a series I will return to once I'm in the right headspace for something that is a very slow build. The politics, the world building, the writing it was all there. I just wasn't ready for it. Then another series I did finish that I didn't really like, book 2 of, was Jade War by Fonda Lee. Now, you guys know I thought Jade City was good, but overhyped. Jade War, I felt very similarly about. I had lots of fun with it because I knew what I was getting now. Very simple writing, very dry writing. I think Fonda Lee gets better as a writer every book, but Jade City and Jade War, I wasn't the biggest fan of her writing. We'll talk about Jade Legacy later in this video. I did read her novella Untethered Sky a year ago, and I thought her writing there was really good. And that was written after Jade Legacy. And I can see the jump up in writing from War to Legacy to Untethered Sky, even though that's just a novella. But in Jade War, I really loved Hilo and Wen. Their relationship and their own journeys, their own stories in the book were absolutely phenomenal. I was hooked to their page. But the 2 other main POVs that we get were in very lackluster romances where I just was not interested in their stories in the slightest. I just wasn't a fan of those 2 POVs in this story. They completely lost me. In Jade City, those 2 were my favorite, but they lost me here. The action was good, the politics were good, and it was enough to keep me going, but it wasn't anything that was going to blow me away, where for a lot of people, I know this is like a 5-star read. For me, it was more like a 3.75, 4 out of 5. Then my month took a bit of a weird turn after that. I kind of went into a bit of a YA kick. Now, I blame Jay Kristoff for this because, as you guys know, he is my favorite author of all time. And anything he writes, I will read. This year, I'm going to be going through the rest of his books that I haven't got to yet. So last month, I started his Illuminate Files trilogy that he does with Amy Kaufman. I read book 1 and the prequel novella. I do recommend, if you do read this series, read the prequel novella right after book 1. It is so fun. There is a messed up AI that you will love, and the AI is a character throughout the series. It adds so much to it. This is a series written through a series of hacked documents, so it's kind of like Dracula, but YA sci-fi, like a group of teens trying to save the day out in deep space. A corporation has come to attack a fringe mining colony, and the story takes place between this colony, these ships with a bunch of refugees on them, and then a jump station out in space. I won't dive too much further into the plot. I'll let you figure that out as you go through it. If you are looking for a fresh reading experience, this is what this series is for. Both the reading format and the audiobook format, which is a full cast, really well done, are just very out from the norm of what we normally get. And being that it's a story told through a series of hacked documents, every single document is something vital to the story. There's some sort of information that we're getting from this document that's adding to the story. So you're always hooked to the page and you always just want to know what's in that next thing. Everything's written in a really fun manner. So if there's a video file that's being read out loud, the guy reading it out loud has a lot of personality. So you get that personality coming through. Yes, some of it is a little bit immature because it is YA. So you've got to know that going into it. But if you have that in your expectations, you're not going to be disappointed by it. Don't expect an adult series. This is YA. Understand that. But the format of this story, you could think might take away from like the characters or the plot or the writing, but it actually elevates all of those things. The characters are incredibly well done. The amount of dialogue and back and forth we get between characters in chat rooms and in conversations through video logs, phenomenal. The banter that Jay Kristoff is able to write, you can see it coming off the page. His humor is coming off the page. And I'm now going to have to read some of Amy Kaufman's series so I can see her influences in these series too, because I've now started another series by these 2. But I absolutely love this series. They were all 4 to 4.5 star reads. They were all entertaining all the way through. There was no wasted space. There was one moment in book 2 where there wasn't something I liked too much, but I think if you're a hard sci-fi fan, it's the type of thing you would nerd out about and love. But for me, whenever there's something with that type of trope, I don't enjoy it as much. But I won't say what it is because I think most people get along with it when it's in a book. All right, but now for the big DNF. Maybe this wasn't the month for me to be reading big books. As you can tell, I read a lot of YA this month, and then books that were a bit shorter with more simple laid-back prose. Now, Sanderson is the same when it comes to the simple laid-back prose. The writing here was very dull and plain. I can't put it in a nice way. Like, I usually love Stormlight. The Way of Kings and Words of Radiance are 2 of my favorite books of all time. That I will stand behind forever. Like, I love those books. Particularly, I really love Kaladin in those books. He carries the Cosmere for me. He is the highlight of the Cosmere for me. But I couldn't get through this book, guys. I felt like when I was reading this, the characters had changed. They'd lost the flavor about them that I love. I felt like they're acting differently to the previous books. The humor just usually I can put up with Sanderson's humor because the deep dive into the mental health of our characters is so interesting and the world is interesting. But now that we've spent so much time in Rosha, the magic is less magical and it's a bit too sciencey for me. And it's not science; it's a fake, made-up science. So it's hard for me to get into that. I just wasn't liking the way the story was going. I had questions at the end of Rhythm of War where I just was unsure with whether I liked that ending, and this just kind of confirmed that no, I didn't like that ending. And I might try this again one day. I don't think it'll be anytime soon. I couldn't imagine picking it back up. I really wasn't liking where the characters were going. I wasn't liking the structure, the way the story is laid out over 10 days. I couldn't imagine doing another 50 hours of audio time or actually physically reading that book. I've talked a lot about Sanderson on this channel. I've raved pretty much all positive things except for Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. But I just wasn't in it for this one, guys. I might try again. I don't know. I haven't seen enough positive reviews to get me back into it, and I'm a little worried what Sanderson would do to Kaladin. He is one of my all-time favorite characters in fiction, not just in the Cosmere. So I might just leave it where it is and not taint my views of those earlier books because they are incredibly special books to me. But after being incredibly let down with Wind and Truth, I went into a book I was expecting to be let down by as well, which was Jade Legacy by Fonda Lee. But this one blew me away. I thought the first two books of the Greenbone saga were quite overrated. I couldn't see how this book was so popular, and then I loved every single minute of Jade Legacy. The payoff from the previous two books was so clear to see. Getting to see the political maneuvers from book one playing out in book three, getting to see a whole generation of politics play out because this book takes place over like 25 years was incredibly fun. Getting to see the characters' journeys, how this family has grown and developed, the politics, guys. I've said the politics like 5 times now because it's just a political series. Just these political maneuvers getting played out over such a long time, getting to jump from pivotal moment to pivotal moment, getting to see all the big moments in our characters' lives. I absolutely loved this. The pacing just kept me gripped the whole time. I didn't feel like any page was wasted, and every character in this book had a good journey. It's not like the first book where there's a few I liked, a few I didn't, and then those characters swapped over in book two where I liked the ones I didn't like as much in book one and book two. Everything was great about Jade Legacy. Now, I could see some people saying the big moments were rushed over. We didn't dive into our characters' heads enough, which I completely understand. I didn't have that issue so much myself, but I just thought I'd put it out there. And I thought Fonda Lee leveled up as a writer here. There was actually lines where I was like, oh, I want to write that down. I want to quote that. That's really good. So, Greenbone Saga, you had me questioning you for the first 2 books, but you won me over with Legacy. I see the hype now. Phenomenal. Then for the last book I finished reading this month, it was another YA book by J. Kristoff and Amy Kaufman, Aurora Rising, book 1 of their Aurora Chronicles trilogy. And this is aimed at a lot younger audience than their previous trilogy, the Illuminate Files. This read very much middle grade with just a hint of YA spicy teenager characters. You know, just like being a little bit cheeky and facetious, but still very much in the YA category in terms of all the romance and stuff like that. But it read very young. I'm actually on book 2 of this series now. It's very easy to read and listen to. Very easy series to listen to. It's not something I'd actually recommend to many people because I'm not sure who it would work for. Age-wise, it just reminds me of all the animated Star Wars series between like the Clone Wars and the Rebels. It just fits between those two. Like Star Wars: The Clone Wars has some very adult themes and story arcs in it, but there's also some story arcs that are aimed at a lot younger audiences in the whole series. So it kind of gives me that vibe. It is a big space opera. Like it's set in Earth's future where there are other aliens around. We are following a group of 18-year-olds that have just graduated from like a United Nations Academy, but it's a United Planets Academy, and they try to go around and keep the peace. They get lost up in a new mission with this girl Aurora, who they found that has been floating around in a quantum fold for 200 years. And she's kind of got some like fantasy vibes to her. So this isn't just a strict hard sci-fi like their other series. This has a lot more fantasy elements. This has more fantasy elements to it, alien elements. So it does have that big space opera feel, has that big Star Wars feel to it in a very young tone. It reads a lot simpler than their previous YA series, but you still get moments of Christoph's humor and his prose that just pop in there, and you're like, oh, this is really good writing. So even though it's a middle grade aimed series, there's moments where you're like, oh, that writing is just incredible and reads better than a lot of the other books we've mentioned today. Yes, I'm biased. Yes, I love Christoph, and his writing is just made for my brain. But I had a really fun time with this. I would give it about like a 3.75, 3.5 out of 5 for book 1 and for what I've read of book 2. But it's just been nice to have a nice holiday read that's very light and easy and reminiscent. And I think I will be doing a YA video for you guys. So make sure you subscribe for that. But don't go diving into this series expecting anything special. This isn't something a lot of people will love. Like there's a lot of, there are a lot of moments where you're like, is that really necessary? Did you have to make that joke? Come on. And there are some moments of the plot where you could pick things apart a little bit, but it's just good fun. But lastly, before we jump into my TBRs, if I stuck to my December and if I went to my January, there's 2 books I am in the middle of. I've been slowly working through Janie Wertz's second book in the Wars of Light and Shadow series, The Ships of Maror. Now, this is a phenomenal classic fantasy. I've just been going slowly through this one as I've been buddy reading this with a good friend, and we've both had holidays this month, so we've been a little bit slow with our reading. But we're getting back to it now. The prose is just delicious. I just, even when I don't fully grasp everything, because the language Janie Wertz uses is so far out of my uncollege educated brain that I don't always get that. It always has my brain active and awake, so I'm paying so much attention to it. I'm always engaged. The world feels huge. The characters feel well-rounded. And it's just a big classic story that I'm hooked to. I love sinking my teeth into Janie's works. And the other book I've been reading has been The Heroes by Joe Abercrombie. And I was planning to read this one in February, but I just saw it sitting on my bookshelf when I was going to get ready for my holiday. I'm like, I'm going to bring that with me. And I picked it up, and this has been my favorite Abercrombie book by far. I have loved every single one I've read yet. Like the lowest rating I've given an Abercrombie book is a 4.5 out of 5, and that was before they hanged. All the others have been 5s. But every single line of The Heroes has been fun. It's just one big book centered around one big battle. Abercrombie just sets a gritty tone and feel. You get inside your characters' heads very easily. You feel like you're part of the world. It just feels real. And the humor will have you laughing out loud when you least expect it. Though you kind of do actually expect it. Like if you read an Abercrombie or a Christoph, you should be expecting to laugh. Like those two just have great humor. But now jumping into my December TBR and seeing if I stuck to it, I did a pretty good job. I didn't get back to live ship traders like I was hoping to, just because I dragged my teeth on Dragon Bone Chair. I tried to push through it when I just wasn't getting into it. So that took up a lot of my time because it is a big book and I got halfway through it before stopping. And I just wanted something lighter and easier to get into first. So I'll go back to live ships next month. But I got to all those other books and then I added in Aurora Rising on top of that. And it's been really fun. But now for the January TBR, what I'm going to be reading. So obviously I'm going to be continuing The Heroes and continuing The Ships of Maror, which I'm both excited about, as you can tell by before. Like these are 2 books I absolutely love by 2 authors I love, like 2 top 5 authors of all time for me now. Abercrombie wasn't there before The Heroes, but now that I've started The Heroes, yes, I'm popping him up into that top 5. Truly phenomenal. Another Janie Wertz book I'll be reading, and I'll be reading with you guys in our book club on Fable, link down in the description, completely free. We're reading the novella The Gallant, which is a prequel novella to her Wars of Light and Shadow series. It's 120 pages. It's set 500 years before the events of the main series. It shows one of the big things about the series getting set up, and there's a little bit of a romance, and it helps give you an idea if Janie is going to be for you, because Janie's not an author that everyone can read or at any time. Her writing is dense, her prose is poetic, and you've got to go slow with it to really let it sink in and digest, and you have to give her books your full attention. You can't half-ass a Janie Wertz book. You need to focus on it. So join in, check out The Gallant to see if this is going to do something for you, because if you vibe with Janie's writing, you are going to love her series. So why not check it out? Because she could change your life. She probably is the best author I've read alongside Stephen Erickson, who I'm also reading this month. I'm going back and restarting Malazan from the start with a bunch of friends. We are reading Gardens of the Moon. I am beyond excited for this. I've got the audiobook just ready to go. I just want to start it now, but we're waiting until the middle of the month to get into it. I'm super excited about this one. I loved it the first time. I can't wait to get back into it and then just go further into the series. Then outside of the Janny Wirtz and the Abercrombie book that I'm in the middle of, I'm also in the middle of Spear of the Emperor and Aurora Burning, because once I finished Aurora Rising, although it was only like a 3.5, 3.75 out of 5 for me, I had such a fun time that I just wanted to jump into the next book and just see how this little middle grade YA space opera was playing out. You guys know how much I love Christoph's writing. I just had to keep going. So we'll finish off that trilogy this month. But Spear of the Emperor, this is my first step into the Warhammer 40k universe. I've been wanting to check it out for a while. After reading Red Rising and Sun Eater last year, I have just been craving space opera. I need more space opera, and I think 40k is going to provide that for me. And I'm doing a buddy read of this with a good friend of mine who has read a lot more 40k and is quite a big fan of it. He reckons it's a good starting point for me because it is a standalone. Like, he has other recommendations that are probably better places to start, but he knows my TBR is a bit too packed. So he's given me a standalone to start with, and then I'm going to go into a trilogy he's also a big fan of. But I started the Spirit of the Emperor a couple of days early on the buddy read, because I was just craving space opera so much after starting Aurora Rising, and Spirit of the Emperor has been phenomenal. This author, within a few pages, may have jumped into like my top 10, top 15 authors of all time. He's got a writing style that feels very grand, very proper. He makes his character feel so real. Like, you can feel how virtuous our character feels. You can feel the world come alive because of how we are able to get in our character's head and just feel immersed in the world. The fact that I am stepping into this huge 40k universe and I don't feel overwhelmed with the world building. I don't feel like I'm being spoon-fed the world. Like, he's just thrown me in there. He's not holding my hand. He's just putting me in the world, and I feel like I'm able to pick things up very well. Like, he's just layering it out smooth enough so I can understand. I don't have to understand everything. I just pick it up as I've been going, and it's been really fun. This feels just really dark. Like, it feels really grim, really dark, really big and epic, and I think I'm going to be reading a lot of 40k this year. I didn't predict it in my TBR video, but I'm excited about this now. I'm very much into the 40k universe, and I'm only 6 chapters into this book. Then, as I said before, I'll be getting back to the live ship traders with Mad Ship and Ship of Destiny. You guys know Hob is a top 5 author of all time for me. Like, look at this lineup for this month, guys. We've got Erickson, Abercrombie, Wirtz, Christoph, Hob, and then I'm going to be checking out a really impressive Russian author whose name I will not even try to pronounce because I would just butcher it, with the brothers Karamazov. I've just read the first chapter of this morning, and I'm very intrigued. This guy is very well known for good reason, and I'm excited to be checking out his books this year. But with that, guys, thank you so much for watching. Please let me know what were the best and worst things you read in December. Please let me know if you read Wind in Truth, what your thoughts were, and specifically let me know what your thoughts were on Kaladin's story arc. I'm really nervous to finish that book because I don't really mind too much about other characters. Like Shallan, I don't really care about, but Kaladin's storyline, I do care about. And I was worried it's not going to finish well. That's a big reason why I couldn't finish, and also just the humor was killing me especially when there's Abercrombie and Christoph writing good humor. Let me know your thoughts on all the books you read in December. What are you going to be reading in January? What are your goals for 2025? What are your reading goals? What do you plan to get to this year? Thank you so much for watching, guys, and just have a great time. Have a great day, guys.